I want to take a moment and say a few things about the controversy that has been surrounding the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Paris, and in particular, that scene, that one part of it where people were dressed in drag, appearing to stand at a table with some resemblance to Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting depicting the Last Supper of Jesus with his 12 disciples. As soon as that happened, social media started blowing up. Very controversial. People saying that it was an intentional attack or mockery of the Christian faith, and large outcry, even not just in America, but in other places in the world too, on social media. And of course, the planners responded, the director of the event and the planners of the opening ceremony responded, no, that it was not intended to mock any particular religion, that it was not motivated or inspired by Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, but instead it was inspired by the mythology of the Greek gods on Olympus, and in particular Dionysus, who's really a party god, god of wine and party and sex and so on. And so they were not intending to mock Christianity. They were celebrating that. So what's going on, and what should our response be? Well, let me say a few things. First, and I really want to say this, is because you and I as followers of Christ are to be people of integrity. We should be careful and never right off the bat assume anything about anyone or assign motives or intentions to people, when the reality is there's not a person in this room that knows another person's heart or intentions. We only know our own. God does, we don't. So be very careful not to rush to the judgment of why someone is doing something, because that calls into question our integrity if we end up being wrong. And we just don't do that because we don't know. So that's the first word. The second thing I would say is do your homework. Do some research so that when you do speak or put something on social media, it's accurate and you know what you're talking about. So the first thing I did, I wasn't watching the Olympics when this happened, so I heard about it afterward. And the first thing I did was I started researching online the various paintings different artists over the centuries have done of the Greek gods and of Dionysus in particular. And what I was surprised to discover is there's a lot of them, more than I expected. And when it comes to Dionysus, they're usually depicting what we would think of today as a drunken orgy. That's just what most of those paintings depict. And very few involve a table of any kind. Now, there is one famous Dutch painting of the gods and Dionysus that's actually in a I can't think, where do you put paintings? Museum or whatever, art gallery in France itself. And it does show a similar scene of just pagan partying, if you will, and it has a table. But what's different about that painting and Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper is in the painting of Dionysus and the other Greek gods that has a table, they're not all standing behind the table. Instead, they're around the table. Now, most of them are behind the table, but some are on the sides or the ends, and there's a few actually in the front of the table. But the scene at the Olympics, as you see up here, they were behind the table until Dionysus in blue came down, and then they started doing other things. So the reality is there are similarities to what happened in the opening ceremony to Da Vinci's painting, but there are also similarities to other paintings of the Greek gods, of Olympus and Dionysus in particular. So there's similarities to both. So what's the reality? Let me give you a worst case scenario and a best case scenario, okay? Worst case scenario is it was an intentional effort to mock Christianity, doing something similar to Da Vinci's painting, but to give them cover, included a few elements from Dionysus and those other paintings to give them cover. Say, no, we really meant that. That's the worst case. They were intentional, but they mixed it up a little bit just to give them cover. That's the worst case. What's the best case scenario? Well, we give them the benefit of the doubt that it was not an intentional effort to mock Christianity and that it was not inspired by Da Vinci's Last Supper. So if we acknowledge that, if we give them that benefit of the doubt and say they're telling the truth, here's the best case scenario. If that is true, what they did shows a complete lack of awareness and sensitivity. Da Vinci's painting depicting Jesus' Last Supper with the 12 disciples is one of the most famous pieces of art in human history. And it is incredulous to think that no one planning this or participating in this had any clue that this in any way resembled Da Vinci's painting, no matter their intentions. So the lack of awareness and the lack of sensitivity that, there may be some people, especially Christians, that look at that and say, wow, they might think we're making fun of them. To have no awareness or sensitivity to that in and of itself speaks volumes. And maybe the director is telling the truth when the director said that his intent, what they wanted to do was to celebrate a pagan festival, in which case they succeeded. And also in doing that, demonstrated to some extent the decadence that exists in much of French society when it comes to sexual issues and sexual values today. So from my perspective, that's the worst case and best case scenarios. Either it was intentional, but if we take them at their word, they were clueless. And they should have had a clue, because I don't know how you can't see the similarities, no matter what your intent was, to mix it up more so there'd be no debate. That would have been easy to do, but they didn't do that. So what are some lessons for us? One, don't be surprised when the culture intentionally or unintentionally mocks the faith. Jesus said it would. But another thing is, don't assume and assign motives, because like I said, we don't know the heart of that director or anyone involved in it. So for us to say we know they did this for this reason goes beyond what we actually know, and that is to bear false witness. That's a lack of integrity. Don't do that. We should be people of integrity. But do your homework. For instance, some of you may have seen the picture that got around on social media after this all transpired, of people gathering in France to pray, and there was the idea that there was this big prayer gathering. The reality, though, is that picture was taken 2 years ago, before the Olympics. And you all have heard me say over and over, would you stop believing at first glance everything you see on social media? And stop forwarding it without actually doing the homework to know that you actually know the truthfulness of what you are forwarding. Because that calls into question your character, and it hurts our testimony. And then another suggestion is to respond with hurt more than anger. Now, things make us angry. The decadence of society when it comes to sexual values, those bother us, but we need to feel hurt more than anger, because the truth is anger doesn't persuade people, but hurt sometimes does. And then pray. I've said many times over the years, if we prayed as much as we complain, the world would be a different place. So let's pray.